continue clashing. So it was almost as if the army couldn't decide whether to get involved or not. But certainly in the more individual cases that we were seeing when the clashes were taking place right next to the tanks, the soldiers were inside the tanks. They were not moving and they weren't doing anything.
Thank you very much for speaking to us and for bringing us the latest there from Cairo. You're watching Al Jazeera's extended coverage of the ongoing anti-government demonstrations in Egypt. It's now past 17:30 GMT, 7:30 p.m. in Egypt. Here are the latest developments. There has been fighting today between pro and anti-government supporters. It started early in the afternoon. Hundreds of so-called Mubarak supporters appeared, and soon after that, a street battle began. The pro-democracy demonstrators seized police ID cards from men backing the government during the fighting. They showed them to the cameras and said they proved that Mubarak had sent government agents onto the streets. Now, earlier gunfire was heard in Tahrir Square. Since then, the military has used Egyptian state TV to deny firing any shots. Let's now speak to Martin Indyk. He's a former U.S. ambassador to Israel, who's also worked as the Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs and for America's pro-Israel lobby, AIPAC. He joins us live from New York. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Mr. Indyk. First off, if I could get your reaction to these dramatic events, an escalating situation in Egypt today. What do you make of these events? How worrying is it?
First of all, I strongly object to your introduction. I'm the Vice President and Director of the Foreign Policy Program at Brookings. So what AIPAC has to do with it when I worked for it 30 years ago is irrelevant to your viewers. Let's start off with that, please.
Okay.
Secondly, what's happening today I think is very disturbing. I'm deeply worried by the developments that you're reporting here, because one fears that this is an attempt by the regime of Hosni Mubarak to create a disorder, thereby to justify a crackdown. And if that happens, the people in Tahrir Square, who have had a whiff of the power of freedom of political expression, I think will not easily be cowed, and I fear that a bloodbath could follow. That's a worst-case scenario, but I'm quite worried at this point that
what would be the best-case scenario in your opinion, sir? We've heard the U.S. administration, the Obama administration, in recent days basically change its language towards Egypt a bit, calling for now a quick transition in Egypt. What more do you think can Obama do to see the situation improve in Egypt?
Well, if it results now in a kind of confrontation between the regime and the demonstrators, America's influence on the situation will go down. It will be very difficult in those circumstances to exercise influence. Up to now, I think the administration and President Obama himself has succeeded in getting the army to exercise restraint and persuading Mubarak that he has to leave the scene. But from here on in, getting Mubarak to leave sooner, which is clearly what the president was signaling last night, and getting the military to play a restraining role rather than a suppressing role is going to be the challenge. And obviously, Washington will be, I think, trying to do that, but I'm fearful about their limited ability to have success in this situation.
It's certainly been a very difficult balancing act for the U.S. administration, hasn't it? I mean, on the one hand, you know, they see Mubarak as an ally in the region, and on the other hand, they have to listen to the demands of the Egyptian people. Do you think this turmoil that we've seen not just in Egypt, but also in Tunisia, and that's probably going to spread to other countries such as Jordan and Yemen, is this turmoil likely to change U.S. policy in the region?
Well, you've already seen it change, I think, quite dramatically. President Obama came in avoiding even the use of the D word, democracy, focused much more on the idea of building the institutions of a civil society and political parties and women's rights and the kind of stuff of democratic reform. But things have now moved quite dramatically, and now he's out there identifying with the people of Egypt in a very strong way, supporting their demands for political freedom. And that was the case in Tunisia as well. So I think that there's a recognition in Washington that the ground is shifting dramatically and rapidly, and people in the region are calling for the kind of values that Americans hold dear themselves, and that we have got to be on the side of change. That said, there are friends in the region, traditional friends, that have helped to protect American interests in the region, and we don't, I think, want to be seen to be abandoning them because of what's happening here. So, as you said, the administration is walking a fine line, but I think they understand very well that the expressions of the people for freedom and democracy is the kind of thing that the United States cannot but support.
If this movement takes hold in Egypt, and if, we're speaking hypothetically, of course, if President Mubarak was to stand down, would the US be losing Egypt?
Well, you know, that's a popular game in Washington when a regime